Hey, this has been my week to be at the dog park. Speaking of dog parks and dogs and fences, today I want to talk to you guys about domesticated life, the domesticated gospel, a domesticated mentality. What is domesticated? It's a Latin word, literally means belonging to the house. This is something I think a lot about, guys. And I've learned a lot concerning this in terms of my dog, right? I have a dog. We have neighbors. I spent the last year trying to teach my dog how to be outside off leash, to listen to my voice, to, when I'm there, to do what I say, to not go beyond where I'm saying. And he wants to roam the world. So here's the thing that I've realized. My dog has a way of seeing the world without all these boundaries. My dog is domesticated to a degree, but he doesn't see the world to the extreme domestication that it is in human terms, right? And so he doesn't understand when he's passing an invisible boundary that I and my neighbor agree is the boundary of our properties where they meet. And so he always wants to go where he's not supposed to go, but for him it's not where he's not supposed to go. For him it's just grass and land and sky and trees. And so what that he's peeing on my neighbor's chair? To him, it's not my neighbor's chair. It's just an object. True in the house. My dog will walk over my yoga mat sometimes when I leave it on the floor, and I don't like that. But he doesn't see that he's walking on my yoga mat. He sees that he's walking across the surface. And what? Because I have a domesticated perspective that he doesn't. Right? We are domesticated, and look, in some ways, to be civilized, to create civilization and civil order is good. But in some ways, it's gone too far. And in some ways, we've domesticated Jesus, the gospel, Christianity. What does domesticated mean? Belonging to the house. Meaning, like, I think this is the essence, guys. We have curated a small space within the larger space of the world. And we have identified or over-identified ourselves with that space. And so we belong to a family. We belong as a family to this house, to this city, to this nation. We go to church in houses. We call them the houses of God. Yet Scripture in the Old Testament, when the temple was being dedicated, God says, can anything contain me? The heavens can't contain me, let alone the earth, let alone this building. So don't think of me as being domesticated. Don't think of me as in a house, in a building. Guys, God only ever commissioned one house to be built for him, the temple in Jerusalem. And yet when that temple was built, he said, but don't think this contains me, guys. God cannot be contained by a house. We were not meant to be contained by a house. As a mystic, one of the driving questions for me over the last 4 or 5 years is, what does it mean to live in the natural world according to the natural order that God created us for? Well, he did not create us to live in houses, because when you live in a house, you create a curated environment where you control that environment. And then when you step out of that environment, you're stepping into this world that is not curated. And there becomes this fearfulness about spaces. And I feel safe in this space, but not safe in that space. And so we've created this mentality of space, of belonging to a space and not belonging to other spaces. And so we have a fearfulness about the world. And yet one of the main freeing messages of God for me is like, the whole world is ours. Like, I don't feel safe in my body. I don't feel safe in the world. Why? Because I've created a mentality that isn't safe if it's not controlled in certain ways and controlled in certain spaces, or controlling certain things. And so I'm afraid if I'm around people I don't know, but I'm more comfortable around people I do know. I'm more comfortable in this space, but not that space, right? This is all a domesticated mentality, right? But what's natural? The Garden of Eden. Being open. And that's the thing about even wearing clothes, guys. You realize that God clothed Adam and Eve after the fall because they felt naked. They were always naked. They were always vulnerable and open, but they weren't afraid of it before the fall. All of a sudden they became afraid of being vulnerable, and they needed to clothe themselves. And clothing yourselves with, clothing your body is one thing, clothing your world. This is what we're doing. We're creating subsets of the world, right? That's domesticated. I was reading about the Romans encountering the Saxons, the Germanic tribes, the Goths, the Visigoths, the Gauls, the Franks. And they were astounded. They called them barbaric, right? Rome was the highest point of civilization 2,000 years ago, until modern democracies in the West, right? But the Industrial Revolution. But the Romans, when they encountered the Saxons, they were surprised. These Saxon people they thought were unrefined. They had beards, long hair. They often didn't even wear clothes. They'd be out in the swamps and the woods, naked or mostly naked. And the Romans were like, that's so uncivilized. That's so undomesticated. But here's the thing, guys. The Saxons, they could be out in the cold, out in the heat. They didn't need to wear clothes. They could walk through water, mud, didn't matter. They weren't domesticated. They weren't acclimated to a subset of a world, or they didn't need to have the world ordered for them to feel safe in it, right? So who was better off, or who is better off, or how are we better off? Are we better off curating spaces and creating a domiciled life where we have to have these structures to feel safe? Or are we better feeling safe in the natural world, in our natural way? What is the natural way? Well, okay, of course it's a fallen world, but to be domesticated, guys, is to need to control things and to hyper control things in order to feel safe. That's not good. That's domesticated. How have we domesticated the gospel? Well, if you don't go to this building and you don't adhere to this pastor or this church's theology and this group of people, then you're not Christian, right? Go to church every Sunday, give your money, help build the building, help send the missionaries, blah, blah, blah. This is domesticated. Can God be known outside all of those things? Abraham encountered God completely outside of religion. Completely. And yet he encountered God. Moses, burning bush. Moses encountered an undomesticated God in an undomesticated space, in an undomesticated way. And yet they encountered God. God without name and God without religion is still God. God without building, God without rules, God without books, God without codes, God without dogmas is still God. Like, it's okay to have scripture, sacred text, religious practices. Those are good things, but those aren't the things. God is God beyond all those things. We need to start to encounter God undomesticated. It helps us become less domesticated. And that's a good thing in some ways, right? We become over-domesticated, over-controlled, hyper-controlled, over-fearful, because we don't know how to be natural people in the natural world. We belong to a house. Does the house belong to you? Does the car belong to you? Or do you belong to it? The things you own end up owning you. Tyler Durden, Fight Club. Domesticated. It's okay to have nice things. It's okay to have a house to live in, to have shelter, to have a job to provide, but don't over-identify with those things. Don't make them your identity. Don't create an identity around those things, because then who are you without those things? When the world goes sideways, guys, and you can't get to your safe space, your safe group of friends, who are you then? How domesticated are you? I think it's good to have some order, obviously, but we need to start to come out of some of this over-order, this over-domestication. And that's my thought for today, guys. Domesticated. Love ya. Think about it. Bye.